Uh, so I just want to describe the image that we're showing on the first slide here. This is an image from a company called Hercynia Arts, who does this amazing aerial and circus and theater performance. And the image is of a person hanging from their knees from an aerial hoop in a park with the sun shining behind them, and their purple hair is sort of swinging over the side. So what is the Animating Toronto Parks program? It's a Toronto Arts Council grants program, and it offers grants of up to $25,000 for free arts programming in any artistic discipline in selected parks that are in Toronto. The program is a strategic funding program managed by the Toronto Arts Council in partnership with the Toronto Arts Foundation, Parks, Forestry and Recreation, Black Creek Community Farm, Park People, and Rise Edutainment. So we have a number of partners on this really complex, really awesome program that help us support you as artists as you develop and deliver your programming for the parks. So when you're part of this program, if you apply for a grant and you get it, you will be supported through the Toronto Arts Foundation's Arts in the Parks initiative. So what is the Arts in the Parks initiative? Well, it's an annual initiative managed by Toronto Arts Foundation that supports free, family-friendly arts programming and parks across Toronto. Participation in this program is a key part of the Animating Toronto Parks Grants program. So when you get a grant, you are automatically sort of included and accepted into the Arts in the Parks program. Arts in the Parks is also a partnership with Toronto Arts Council, with Park People, and with Rise Edutainment. So Arts in the Parks offers support to grants recipients that includes help with community outreach and creating local partnerships that will assist you in delivering your programs. Park wayfinding signage, volunteers, marketing, social media and promotion, as well as support with developing strategies to make your project successful. There's sort of a one-stop shop for park programming. Everything you sort of need to know, every possible issue that you might come up with, they've been through it before and will help you all the way through from the beginning of your program to the end. So working with the Arts in the Parks team is a really key part of this program. And communication with that team is really, really important. The better the communication is, the more support that they can offer you. They're an incredible team of people, really, really experienced at doing this work, and they will basically just wrap around a little program of supports around you and your project that will sort of like shepherd you through the whole process. So how do you apply for this program? So the first thing to do with any grants program is just to read the program guidelines and find out, who's eligible for this program, what are they looking for? So the first thing to ask yourself is whether or not you're eligible. And I'll go over what those eligibility requirements are in a moment. Is the program a good fit for my project? Sometimes, people may try to shoehorn a project into a program like this because it's a substantial piece of funding and it's a really excellent program, but the project that they may have in mind might not be actually a good fit for a park. So that's a really important thing to think about. The other element of this program is the list of parks. We have worked with Parks, Forestry and Recreation, with Park People, with Toronto Arts Foundation, and also with the city councillors to identify specific parks in the city that we're working in. The focus of this program is to support artists and arts programming in areas of the city that are outside of the downtown core of the city, which still has the majority of funding and of programming that happens. So we're really looking strategically to invest in Etobicoke, North York, Scarborough, York, East York, and really wanting to work carefully and work mindfully with communities in those areas of the city. So there is a specific list of parks that are available for programming for this arts program, for this grants program. And that list is on our website, and there's also a description of every park that's on that list. So the best thing to do is once you've read the grant guidelines, just go and look at that parks list and think about, you know, which park or group of parks might be interesting for you. Maybe you have a connection to a particular park because you're living there, or you grew up there, or you work with an organization that's close to that park, or not. So you have to really think about what your connection to the parks are, what organizations are there, and who you may want to partner with to create your programming. So the next step would be, if you don't already have a Smart Simple account, to just go ahead and create one. In order to do that, you would have to decide whether or not you're going to apply as an individual artist or as a collective, which could be 2 or more artists, or as an arts organization if you have that infrastructure. So there may be a couple of things to consider if you're, you know, maybe taking the lead on a project, but you are collaborating with other people, whether or not you apply as yourself, or you form a collective with those other people. The only things to think about would be if you receive a grant in your own name as an individual artist, you will receive a T4A for that grant amount. So it's something to think about with in terms of your taxes, you know, whether or not that makes sense for you to receive that grant in your name, or whether that's going to, you know, impact your financial status if you're have other forms of income that you're thinking about that you need to be careful about. So the other option obviously is to create a collective. As long as you're working with another person or more people, you can create a collective in any name you choose, but whatever name you do choose, you have to commit to that name, and whatever name you apply in, whatever collective name you apply in, that will be where the grant funding is transferred. So you can't apply as a collective and then later ask us to give you the funding as an individual. That's not possible. So you need to just keep in mind that if you're forming a collective, you will need to go to a bank and get a bank account in the name of that specific collective as it's listed in your grant application. So that's just something to think about. So the next piece that you want to do is, once you've opened your account, is to click on that Animating Toronto Parks Grant application. Just open it up and just skim through the whole thing, figure out sort of what's involved, what are the questions that you need to be responding to, what are the fields that you need to fill in, what are the things you need to upload, such as, you know, CVs or support materials like video or photographs of your work. And just gather up all of those materials, whether that means reaching out to collaborators for video or asking them for CVs. And we all know everyone hates giving you their CV. So that's something you should give a little bit extra time for, just, you know, chasing people down and begging them for their CVs when they really don't want to look at them and update them. I know I hate doing that. So I don't envy anyone who has to sit down and update their CV, but it takes some time. Give them some time, give yourself some time to do that work. And also things like support materials, if you have maybe a long video and you'd like to edit it down to, you know, the form that's acceptable, which would be 3 minutes. I think it's 3 minutes. Give yourself a little time to edit that down. Also, you can just submit the full video and tell in the notes, describe exactly where in the video you'd like the grant review panel to watch from. So the other thing that you can do, and I actually don't think a lot of people will know this, and I certainly didn't know this until I worked at Toronto Arts Council, was you can actually talk to the grants program managers. We're really here to support you. We don't make any decisions about who does and does not get the funding at all. We're simply here for you and to support you and help you to write the best grant you possibly can, and talk to you on the phone and answer your emails all that kind of work. So we're really here to do that for you. We want you to get the funding, and we want you to put the best possible grant in so that you have the best chance that you can to compete in the program, because it is pretty competitive. And then later the grant review panel will be the ones who decide who does get the funding, and I'll talk a little bit about that assessment process too. So once you've done all of those things, you've written your grant, you've pulled all your materials together, all you have to do is make sure everything is submitted where it needs to go, and just click submit before the deadline, which is Monday, December 14th at 11:59 p.m. Okay, so what do you get? What do you get if you apply to this program? What does it offer? So this program offers grants of up to $25,000, as I said. Smaller grants, no problem. Full amount grants are no problem. Anything in between is fine. This grant can actually fund up to 100% of your project expenses. So if you don't have any other sources of revenue for this project, that's fine. That's totally okay. And if you have an idea for just quite a small project, maybe you're an emerging artist and you just want to give yourself a chance to test something out, maybe you only need $5,000, that's also okay. It's a really open program, lots of room for all different sorts of projects. So you get that grant. You also get in-kind support from Toronto Arts Foundation's Arts in the Parks initiative, which I talked a little bit about already. You get support with navigating park permitting. You get a free park permit from Parks, Forestry and Recreation. We work with this incredible support staff member of PFNR, whose name is Andrea Damiano. She is your park permit ninja. She will figure out what is your activity and what are all the different kinds of permits that you might need, if there are additional permits that you might need. And she'll also just help you get that permit that you need to do your work. So when you apply for this program, when you get the funding, you get all of these supports, but you're not necessarily given a permit right away. You still have to go through the permit application process. The cost of that will be waived, but you still have to sort of apply. And you have to get your application approved. And sometimes that can be complex depending on what it is you want to do. So that's why we have Andrea, who's kind of on our team as our liaison for that division of the city, and that will help you because it can be quite bureaucratic and quite complex. Parks are extremely complex regulatory environments. They're quite heavily regulated public spaces that you can run up against in various different issues depending on what it is you want to do. So it's really good to have some support to sort of navigate that process because it can feel a little bit daunting, but you have us there to do that with you. What else do you get? Well, you get general liability insurance that will be paid for by Toronto Arts Council. So we will cover you in your activities that you're doing in whatever the park is that you end up in. You will also get support with community outreach and engagement from the folks at Toronto Arts Foundation, the Arts in the Parks program, from park people who are our community partner and they work with over 100 Parks Friends groups all across the city, and they've helped community organizations develop these Parks Friends groups in order to support community programming in the parks. So these Parks Friends groups are quite different depending on which park you're in. Their capacity may be very limited, or some of them have quite high capacity. So it depends on what the park is and what the group is that you may want to collaborate with them. But whatever it is, you're going to want to definitely get their support on, and their advice on creating your programming. And then we also work with Rise Edutainment, who have been helping to connect us also with community, but also with artists specifically who are living in communities, in the communities that these parks are located in, and making sure that we are reaching artists and also giving a platform for folks to do additional programming. So they may partner with certain projects where it makes sense, and they may offer additional programming that is community by folks that are living in that particular community. So that's been really amazing, and through that we've met lots of really incredible new artists, and hopefully they're applying this year. That's what I really hope. That'd be amazing. So what types of activities does this program support? So this program supports specifically free arts programming. So you cannot be charging admission or tickets. You cannot be, asking for donations. It just has to be completely free and open to the public. And as I said, those parks are all located in Etobicoke, East York, York, North York, and Scarborough. What are we talking about when we're saying arts programming? What does that mean? Well, it means any discipline at all, any arts discipline that you're working in. That could include dance, music, theater, visual arts, community engaged arts, or any other art form that you're working in. What does this program not support? This program cannot support permanent installations. We don't support commercial or for-profit events. So any events that require, a ticket or a donation to be given, we cannot support those kinds of projects. Any costs that are related to, capital equipment purchase cannot be included in this grant, or any activities that are taking place outside of the City of Toronto. Also, this program can't cover operational costs. So, permanent staff salaries, things like that. So who can apply? Well, the main eligibility is for professional artists. That could be individual artists, artist collectives, or arts organizations. If you are a non-arts-based nonprofit organization, you can apply, but it has to be for a project that includes the collaborative involvement of professional artists with community members. And it has to include the payment of professional artist fees. So how does TAC define professional artist? The definition is pretty wide open, and there's also room for interpretation, understanding that these categories might not be as inclusive as we need them to be. And so there is flexibility there. But for the most part, we're talking about someone who has developed their skills through either training or practice, or both. Someone who's recognized by artists working in the same artistic field or discipline. Somebody who's practicing their art. Somebody who's seeking payment for their art. Doesn't mean you're always going to get paid, but you're intending to be paid, and you ideally would like to be paid for your work. And somebody who has a history of either public presentation or exhibition of their work. So I wanted to talk a little bit about types of grants at TAC and eligibility, just so everyone understands. That TAC basically has two distinct funding categories. One is called arts discipline funding, and that's your sort of traditional funding categories. So operating and project funding in the arts, the various arts disciplines like theater, dance, music, and so on. And then we have another category which is called strategic programs. So Animating Toronto Parks is an example of one of our strategic programs. So would programs like Artists in the Library, Open Door, and there are a number of other strategic programs. So as an applicant, an artist collective, or an organization, whatever the entity is that you're applying for a grant, you can have a grant in each of these two categories. So as a theater artist, I could have a project grant in a theater program, and I could also have an Animating Toronto Parks Grant for different projects, obviously, but you can have one in each category. And for the strategic programs, which is the same for arts discipline programs, you can have up to one strategic program grant per calendar year. So this program, Animating Toronto Parks, although the deadline is in December, it is considered part of the 2021 calendar year. So if you get this grant, that means you would not be eligible to apply for another strategic program grant in the year 2021 until this project is complete and the final report is filed. So I wanted to talk a little bit about assessment, just so you understand sort of how grants are chosen and awarded at TAC. So TAC, one of TAC's two principles is peer review. The other is arm's length. Like, we're an arm's length agency. We're funded by the City of Toronto, but we create our own strategy and we make our own decisions about where funding, how funding programs are created and developed. And we, none of our programs are, the grants are not decided by city councilors or city staff. So we use only the peer review process. So our grants are decided, awarded by a jury of, a grant review panel. We used to call them juries, and we've changed that for obvious reasons that I probably don't need to talk about. The grant review panel is composed of practicing artists. So that's how your grant is decided. And for this particular program, each program has slightly different application assessment criteria. For this program, they'll be looking at artistic merit, demonstrated capacity of the applicant to carry out the project as it's outlined in your application, the financial viability of the project, which includes adequate payment of artist fees. That's really important for the grant review panel to see. Feasibility of the work plan, so adequate budgeting and planning, things like, permitting, making sure you're planning for permitting, including additional permits outside of the special events permit that will be free. You may require additional permits such as building permit or noise exemption. These are things you'll need to be budgeting for. So making sure you allocate budget for those types of costs. If you're in a park that does not have a bathroom, you will need to bring in portable bathrooms on site that are accessible. That's a really, really important piece of hosting, but it's also a really important piece of taking care of your artists that are working in that park. And it's a really important accessibility piece, being able to have an accessible bathroom on site if you're programming for the public. And, obviously as an artist, as a theater artist, being in a park, I've worked in parks a lot in the past, and, being in a park and not having bathroom access is a living nightmare, and it can really wreck your day. If you're trying to get a 6-hour rehearsal out of people and they have to take off 45 minutes up the street and back again just to go to the bathroom, it's a nightmare. So is having these logistics, this is another reason why this grant amount is larger than you might see in other categories like the theater program, is because all of these expenses really add up quickly, and it's really important to have them. So you'll find the more you get deeper into this program, you're going to hear us talk about bathrooms all the time. It's really annoying, but we're going to talk about it. So any other site related logistics, equipment rental, obviously not equipment purchase, because that would be considered a capital expense, but any equipment rental, lighting, sound, things like that will go in the budget. So the extent to which the proposed project will engage and include local community members is also really important. So figuring out whose park this is, and if you don't already know because you live there, figuring out whose park this is, and how to program for those folks and how to include them in your programming is really important. And then finally, the quality, obviously that's relative, of the proposed experience of the activity that will be provided to the community. So TAC accessibility grants. This is an additional amount on top of the grant. So you can apply to up to $25,000 plus $5,000 more dollars as an accessibility amount. And this is specifically related to expenses for artists. So this is not about the audience. This is just for artists with disabilities or artists who are deaf who are participating as key participants in your project. So any expenses related to artists with disabilities and artists who are deaf, such as ASL interpretation, or attendant care or anything like that. If you're not sure, just talk to us and we'll talk it out with you. We're quite open and flexible about what those costs might be. So just let us know and we can talk about it. We also have an amount that's available to anyone who needs support in applying for a grant. So if you're an artist who is deaf or an artist with a disability, you can access payment for support service provider to support you, and you can have up to $500 a year for that. So that can be to help you navigate the granting system. That can help you to help you create your application, or say you have a final report that you've been putting off for years and it's stopped you from applying for a grant. You can also get support just filing that final report. I know that final reports create a lot of anxiety for people, and I know that I have had a great deal of anxiety in the past about final reports that I had to turn in. And so, if you just need some help with that, you can hire somebody to do that work with you. I also just want to say in general, like final reports, I also didn't really understand this before I started working here, but final reports are basically like you are talking to the grant program manager about how your project went. So don't worry too much about them, like just tell us how it went. We really want to know. We love reading final reports. It's so interesting to hear what went right, what went really well, what you had a hard time with. So think about a final report as you're just having a friendly cup of coffee with your program manager, telling them all about how your project went. Just take the pressure off and don't worry too much about it. It's just, it really helps us design the programs for you to make them better. If we feel like we're hearing the same thing over and over, people are having issues with a certain piece, we can then, we can change the programs. We change things all the time. So your feedback is really useful to us, and it's really important. Beyond the final report, your feedback is really useful. So if there's anything that you find hard or don't understand or find frustrating, just let us know. It's really helpful for us to know that kind of stuff, and it helps us redesign programs. So that's kind of all I have. That's all I have. You can contact me if you want to set up a time to just chat. Tell me your project idea. If you want to talk through maybe some park choices that you're kind of weighing, you're not sure, we can talk about that. Or if you need me to set you up with somebody to chat with somebody at the foundation, and the Arts and the Park staff, we can also do that. Whatever you need help with, there's loads of time between now and the deadline. Just get in touch and reach out. We're really happy to help anytime. So I'm going to stop that screen share, and we'll just open it up to questions now. We also have some folks here from the foundation. Hasanika and Alexandra are here. So if you have questions for them, you can also just let me know. I see there's a bunch of questions in the chat here in the Q&A. Can you present in a different park that's not on the list? No, I think a lot of people see the title of this program and they want to do something in Christie Pitts. Christie Pitts is not on this list, neither is Trinity Bellwoods, and we really are focused on parks that are outside of the downtown. But that said, you know, if there's a park that you see that is, you know, somewhere that makes sense in this catchment area, and it isn't on the list, talk to us about it, and we'll have to have like a bit more of a nuanced conversation about it. But these parks are pre-approved. They've already been, we've gone through a lengthy pre-approval process with Parks, Forestry, and Recreation. It's very difficult to do that process again. So it's unlikely at this point that we would be able to keep adding parks to the program. But if you have a particular park in mind, you really think it's something really important, and you felt like we missed it, let us know. And also let us know, because we may be able to research it for you and add it and go through the approval process and add it next year. One thing I forgot to tell you, which is an important change to this program. Gosh, I didn't even really highlight all the changes. I really meant to do that. One of the big changes to this program is that the projects no longer have to happen in the summer. I also want to talk about COVID. But the programs don't have to happen in the summer anymore. You have up to 2 years to complete your project. And it can happen at any time of year. Of course, there are complexities and logistical considerations when you are thinking about doing a winter project, because you have to think about things like, you know, snow removal for accessibility. And also most of the parks in the city, they stop opening the bathrooms in the winter time. We can try to see if they'll open the bathrooms for us, but there's no guarantee they will. So there's a lot of complexity about doing, you know, winter programming. But it would be so amazing if some of you would do some winter programming, because the city needs it so badly. Our parks have to be 4 seasons. Our arts programming has to be 4 seasons, particularly now during COVID, because obviously indoor spaces are really restricted for us, and outdoor spaces really offer this potential place where we can come together and share our work with each other in a safer way. So I feel like this program is really exciting right now, especially considering COVID, that it may offer a lot of relief for artists who are really looking to move their practice outside. I think somebody has their hand up. Oh, Janine. Are you able to unmute that?
There you go. Janine, you can speak now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thanks so much. I don't know, you just mentioned, because you hadn't talked about COVID, I have questions or a question around that. And my question is that obviously at the moment, there's restrictions as to how many people can be at an event, even outside. And there's restrictions about, you know, if you have an event outside, like a farmer's market, you have to have barriers up and you have to have access control. Should we consider all of that in the application, or are we, you know, assuming in the application that by next year, and hopefully that will be the case, you know, things are back to more normal? What are the thoughts on that, or how should we approach that? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that's probably what on everyone's mind, so I'm really glad you brought it up. I would go ahead and consider, I would go ahead and think about the way, I think there's a lot of potential that next year may look very similar to this year. It may be a little less unpredictable, because now we've gone through a couple of cycles and there's been some sort of like experimentation with, you know, how to regulate, how to allow. So you'll want to definitely imagine your project happening in the park with probably a relatively limited audience, whether that's 50 people max, 100 people max. We'll have to see what that looks like depending on how this all plays out and when it is that you end up doing your project. So that may sort of scale up or scale down in terms of like the capacity of people that are allowed, but really thinking creatively about how to keep people safe as a core part of your project will be really, really important, I think, in this particular round. So I think, yeah, that will be probably a big part of every single application, I would imagine. I think we have a couple more. Summerist.
Hi, I've unmuted you, so you can speak.
Hi there, how you doing? Can you hear me?
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
And yeah, so I've never applied for a grant before, and I'm a visual artist. I do sculptures, murals, all that kind of stuff. And I've always kind of swayed away from doing grants, only because I always figured that the money obviously has to be allocated. Like that's all I do is my artwork. So I've always figured that the money was specifically only for material costs, any extra expenses, whatnot. But how do we factor in getting paid as an artist to do it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different ways you can think about that. I think depending on people's artistic discipline, they may be looking to different industry standards. As a visual artist, you may want to look at the CARFAC rates and just look at it. CARFAC publishes a sort of a rate book each year. You could look at CARFAC 2020 and just scroll through, and they've broken down all different sorts of activities and what the minimums would be for those various different activities. So that may be where you want to begin as a visual artist. As a theater artist, you would want to maybe look at say Canadian Actors Equity Association. If as a dance artist, you want to look at CADA.
So I charge for my art for sure, right? And I've set, like, when it actually comes to doing my artwork, I have my pricing and whatnot. But when it comes to a grant proposal and when putting through like my labor costs and whatnot for myself, are there acceptable rates and unacceptable rates for what the grant writers are basically available to give?
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't prescribe any particular rates. It's really up to you to decide how you want to, pay yourself for your time. We would be looking though comparatively to industry standards like CARFAC.
Okay, so that's what I was curious. So if I look up, and how do you spell that? Sorry.
CARFAC. Yeah, if you just Google that, you can just sort of use that as a baseline for yourself.
Absolutely, because yeah, that's the thing is like if I really want to write a proposal, I want to make sure that like the best way to actually get accepted isn't to over or underestimate my time. You know what I mean? And that way it's still going to get put through. And that's the other thing I was wondering. So a lot of the things that you guys have been kind of going over is more like maybe event based and whatnot. Is that would it require an event, or would it just be if I wanted to build like a piece and then have it installed there, even if temporarily?
Yeah, temporary installations are great for sure. There may be different things to consider depending on what the work is and how it's intended to be installed and viewed. If it's something that needs to be installed over a period of time and that can't be removed at night, say for example, you may be looking at potentially building permits and things like that.
Sure.
So just thinking about that, I think, is important. If it's something that it just goes up for the day and then you take it away at night, that's really easy to manage for sure. I think sometimes there's concern about leaving things up overnight because stuff gets set on fire, it gets spray painted, it gets and
that's kind of what
trashed. So
that's what I was curious about. So if I were to build something as an installation, so it would be temporary, as in like it would be up for a day.
Yeah, you could do that. Mm-hmm.
Or it wouldn't be an extended period of time, right? Because of the park?
I would say the projects could be up for as long as it makes sense to you, just that they wouldn't be permanent. So, if you wanted to have something up for 2 years, you could do that.
Of course.
If you wanted to have something up for a month, you could do that. If you
I
wanted
would
to
take
do
that
something
back.
big on a daytime, one day, you could do that. That's fine. Mm-hmm.
And then I would reassume like the property, I guess.
Yeah, it'd be yours the whole time.
Okay, completely.
You'd just be showing it to the community for a while.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you
Okay.
for that question.
Thank you.
Okay, Julian.
Hi, Julian. You can speak now.
everyone.
Hi.
Hi. Two things. The first one is I did a project for Cultural Hotspot, and there was a disconnection in between the permits, City of Toronto, and these type of grants. So I do not know if these grants actually are work cohesively, you know, with the permits, because I have to be very blunt, but there is a lot of red tape that you have to go through when you're asking for permits with the City of Toronto. I don't know about if security is required at a park as it is required with auxiliary police in the street, and also all these permits and rules that usually happen in this when you're doing these projects. And also, sorry, I just want to mention this to the person who spoke before. There is a network that is called Noun. It's part of the Toronto Arts Foundation. They actually run workshops for you, things from how to price your artwork and different mentorship projects where they can actually help you and guide you with these kind of rates that you can charge. And I don't know about this specific grant, Erica, but usually these grants are chosen by peer members. So these are peer artists as well, who actually know already. I don't know if this grant is the same thing. So usually they probably have in mind usually what is a rate that is okay to charge for when you are planning a project as well. And also another thing is the insurance, Erica, these projects and the insurance and the permits.
Yeah, so all of the things that you've just asked are all in the grant guidelines, and I covered them as well, but I'll just reiterate. When you get a grant for Animating Toronto Parks, the permit cost is covered. So the permit will be free. It's a special events park permit that will be covered.
Oh.
And then also the insurance, general liability insurance, is covered by Toronto Arts Council. Yes, Tanya, that's an awesome question. Thank you. Can I submit my proposal to the program manager to give me feedback before I submit it? Yes. If you can give me a good chunk of time, like don't send it to me on the morning of the deadline. I probably will have a difficult time getting to it, but if you can give me, a week before the deadline, say, and you want me to have a look and then just send you some notes back or have a phone conversation, I'm happy to do that. That's a great way to, get some feedback, because I've been through 5, 6 of these panels, and I kind of know the types of questions that the grant review panel would tend to ask, and so I can kind of pose those questions to you, and it is helpful in knowing that before you apply, for sure. Hi there, can community groups apply? Are they considered a collective? That's a really good question. So there's sort of 4 different ways that you can apply to this grants program. You can apply as an individual artist, as a collective of artists. So I don't know exactly what you mean by community group, but if that community group is a group of artists, certainly you could apply as an artist collective. Excuse me. You can also apply as an arts organization, or if you're a nonprofit organization that's not an arts organization, you can apply. But could a collective of people who are not artists apply? No. You need to be a group of professional artists, or you'd have to be an organization that was nonprofit. If you're not sure where you sit, just give me an email and we can talk about it, because some of these questions can be a bit nuanced. Like, say you're an artist that's collaborating with non-artists. That's okay too. We can just figure that out. Do artists need vulnerable sector check? We haven't required that. No, I mean, I would say if you're going to develop a program which may, something like, a program that's for kids, that is drop off, that is not parental supervision, I would definitely have all of that stuff queued up and ready to go. Get your screenings all queued up and describe very clearly what all of your sort of like safety and care protocols are going to be. Also from Naomi, nuance to earlier question, if I'm applying to a strategic program, library residency, but I don't know if I got the grant yet. This is an awesome question. So yes, you have applied for an artist in the library residence and you haven't heard back yet. You're not going to hear back about that grant probably until January. So you're not eligible to apply for Animating Toronto Parks until because that's considered an active application. So you have to wait till you find out whether you got that grant or not before you can then apply for additional residency programs. So you could consider as your backup plan as something that might be interesting and in your wheelhouse, Naomi, that there's a program called Animating Historic Sites. We haven't announced what the next deadline for that will be, but if it is happening next year, it will likely be in spring. So that's something you could just have in your back pocket if you weren't successful at the library. Okay, Barbara. What would be some examples of community engagement if the activity is a concert, for example? I think it depends. Like if your project is just like quite a straightforward performing arts presentational project, it's not necessarily community engaged art project. That's great. We very much have funded projects like that. Always part of this program. So then you would want to, because it's very hard to get people out to a park unless you're deeply connected and rooted to the community. You know how to reach everyone already. If you have that superpower, that's wonderful. If you don't, it's going to be a lot of work just to get the word out and get people to attend. So that's your community engagement, is how do you reach people? Who could you collaborate with? Who could you work with? Who could you partner with? I would do a social infrastructure audit of the entire neighborhood that you're interested in working in, or maybe even the larger sort of borough, like wherever it is, or the neighborhood, depending on the scope and scale of who you want to reach, to try and find, maybe an organization that you want to partner with to get folks out. So maybe they are an organization that really needs programming, and you're an artist who really needs an audience. So you just plug those things into each other. That's one way of developing a partnership. How long can the event be set for? Yeah, it completely depends on what your project is. All the projects that have come through this have been so different from one another. There's like a one-day festival, or there's a deeply community engaged program that goes for months and months on end. It depends on what you want to do. It can be any time period, depending on what your project is. I don't know if that's helpful. If it's not, just give me an email. We can talk more. Hi, Charles. Out of curiosity, I see that projects can start earlier. Yes. Yes. What is the reason for this? Well, so many reasons. I think that, as we learn more about this project and the rhythms of this project, and also the complexities of working in parks, we start to really think about, how can this program is like in permanent pilot mode. We're always experimenting and changing. And one of the things that COVID sort of changed our mindset on was really about this summer piece. Originally, the original rhythm of this project is you apply in December, you find out in February, and then you hit the ground running to produce in June. And this year, we really asked ourselves, why are we creating that incredibly short project runway and sort of forcing everyone into just a summer? And summer is the time for parks where there is quite a great deal of pressure on parks for programming, and it'll be only ever more so with COVID. So how can we sort of create space? How can we create more spaciousness in this program? How can we kind of work with the rhythms that emerge from the types of projects that come through this program, instead of shoving them into our structure that we have different reasoning about why we'd like to do it that way. So we were just wanting to create some more space and work with what we're seeing emerge. So we want to give people a couple of years to do the project instead of a couple of months. I hope that helps. Do we have any more hands up? No, okay, cool. I'm gonna keep going with this Q&A. I am Claire. I'm not sure where I want to show my work, but I want it to be seen by passersby. Will you help me choose a park? I cannot help you choose a park. It is really important that you, but okay, I'll put it this way. Some projects will come forward with a very, very specific park in mind and very specific reasons for choosing that park. Other projects may say, you know, this project, I don't know where I want to put it. It could go anywhere. And then the grant review panel will be the ones who figure out, you know, to match, who be the ones that will match you with a park. So that's also possible. So there's a section of the grant in the project details section where you can talk about that. You can click every single park on the list if you want. You can click only one park. And there's an area where you can talk about why you selected that particular park. You may be saying, this project has to go in Roundtree Mills Park. It is designed for Roundtree Mills Park. It's community specific. I can't do it anywhere else. It has to go there. You might be saying, I live in Etobicoke. I will do this project in any park in Etobicoke. Or you may be saying, you know, here are all the parks with bodies of water in them, and that's important to my practice. So I need to work in a park that has a river or something like that. Every project will have its own logic. So I think figuring out how and why you're going to choose your parks is important. What about the weather? This is a fabulous question. If we're rained out, what do we do? Okay, so do we have to give the money back? No. Here's what you do. You're going to create and it is in the grant application as well, you're going to create a weather contingency plan. And it's a really important piece about working outside. So you're going to create a plan, and that plan might be, I have a one-day festival that happens at a particular time of year for specific reasons, and this project has to go on rain or shine. This is a rain or shine project. That could be your rain plan. Your rain plan is rain or shine. Your rain plan could be, I'm doing this community engaged residency in this park. I'm going to be there every Tuesday and Wednesday from noon to 4 for August, September, October. So if it rains, doesn't matter. You have so many dates booked, you don't need to replace that one single date. Just let it go. It really depends on the scope and scale and flexibility of your project. If it's, you know, you're doing a dance performance that's 3 evenings, you're going to want to book a couple of rain dates. You might even want to book the following weekend on the off chance that it's supposed to rain all weekend when you're supposed to do it. So it depends on what it is you want to present, and you need to sort of adjust that rain plan to suit the specific needs of that project. If you're not sure, talk to us about it and we can sort of help you think through it a little bit. Great question, thank you. Okay, can my program be collaborative with other applicants, whether they received a grant or not? I'm not completely sure I understand this question, to be honest. When you're putting your application together, you need to list your project collaborators. So I think I'm not sure what you mean. Why don't you follow up with me via email and maybe just give me a little bit more information. I can probably help you answer that. Or if you want to pop on, put your hand up and pop on.
Sure. I see Gabriel has
Okay.
their hands up, so I'm just going to allow them to speak. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, hey there.
Hi. That was your question. Yeah, why don't you tell me what you're thinking?
Okay, sorry, which was the question that we're answering right now? Collaborative with other applicants. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I do have 2 or 3 different questions. So as far as my project, I would like to make a concert series, which will allow for all of my artist friends and my other peers to be able to perform on a regular basis in parks. I started this year, and actually I collaborated with Andrea in parks, and we got me a permit, and we started the whole process. So now I'm looking to expand and have a roster of multicultural artists, entirely acoustic, so that different parks in different neighborhoods, like when you get off of work or whatever, you can come and you can have a safe place to hang and experience live music again at a safe distance. It worked really well this year, but I would like to work with as many musicians as possible and fill as many parks as possible with live entertainment. And I'm interested in having, you know, a diverse group. So like around Eglinton and Eglinton and Marley, to have, you know, Mento and Calypso and Soca and Reggae in their parks, because that's where I grew up. I know that that's like a very Caribbean influenced. And then, you know, in Little India, to have like the classical musicians there from India to be able to play in parks, etc. But if some of the artists who have applied to this program did not get an opportunity to receive a grant, is it possible for me to still work with them if they come to me and they're like, hey, you know, I still want to perform, I have this thing, and they meet all the criteria that I was approved for? Can I still work with them?
So when you're putting together your application, you need to talk about what your sort of curatorial vision for this project is. So what are you doing as the artistic producer, whatever your role is of this project? How are you selecting artists? So you need to explain what that process is. Right? So if you know some of the artists that you have worked with in the past and you'd like to bring them back, that's great. So contact all those people, get their CVs and their bios, get their support materials. That's going to be the core of your application. Then you're going to probably want to build out, and you're going to want to build out by explaining exactly how it is you're going to put out your call and how it is you're going to select those additional artists. Can you work through TAC to select those additional artists? No, that's not possible. We can't give you contact information for folks who applied and didn't get grants through the program. That's not something we would be able to share. You'd have to really figure that out for yourself. Yeah.
Sure. No, that it wasn't about getting their contact information as opposed to like being able to collaborate with them despite having potentially been rejected, having had their application be rejected.
It's not a rejection. It's just there's only so much funding, and so the projects that are the most highly scored will be the ones that do receive funding. It doesn't mean that everyone else is rejected, or doesn't mean that they don't meet a standard. So there's no concern there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I think Emily has a question next. Emily Reed.
Hi, Emily. You can speak now.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. I just want to make sure, you were talking earlier about winter, and I don't think we'll approach that idea, but I just want to make sure for our benefit and probably others who are new, that the timelines are still the same as they used to be. So for example, if we applied to do a winter thing, we won't find out in time to do it this winter, but therefore we'd have to apply saying we're going to do something next winter. Does that mean we couldn't apply next December for a grant of that coming year as well?
So projects can happen as early as, it's in the grant guidelines. I think it's as early as May or June. I might have to just look that up because I have a number of project scope ranges in my head. It's essentially, so we'll do the adjudication in February. You'll find out if you get the grant or not in like March, maybe even late February, and you'll get the funding right away. So as soon as, well, hopefully right away, essentially as soon as you get the notification letter, like you can do any of the activities, and from that notification letter, you have 2 years. So, you know, you could start as early as, you know, say April or May if you actually get the funding then, and go up to 2 years after that.
My question is just, that means that if something were later than say next fall, then we couldn't simultaneously apply to next year's deadline as well.
No, not if you have an active grant that's not finished yet, no.
Okay, that's what I just want to make sure.
Yeah. So you can only have one grant at a time. You have to finish it. You could hold it for up to 2 years, but if you want to get it done sooner so that you can apply for another one, that may be something that you would have to take into consideration. I'm not sure when the deadline is going to be next year. I'll be honest. I'm considering pushing it into 2022, but I'll keep in communication with all of you about that. Can proposals be mainly for visual art, but also perhaps incorporate music performance? Sure. Yeah, any discipline is totally eligible. Can I submit my project in order to find out what additional permits would need to include in the budget? Sure. You know, Carl, if you want to just email me, we can set up a time to chat. If you want to send me a draft of your application before that, that's cool. I can look at it. If you want to just chat through your project with me and consider the possible permits you might require, we can do that as well, whatever makes sense for you. Hi, Jess. Does the grant review panel prioritize programming that is more interactive or participatory rather than more static? Nope, I wouldn't say so. There's a huge, like, this is a pretty big umbrella, this program. So there's stuff that's a little bit more presentational, a little bit more performance-based, stuff that's very interdisciplinary, interactive. So I'm gonna read the other part of your question. Have activities happened at night in the parks before? Yeah. And what are the major concerns, issues about those types of events? Yeah, there's this amazing festival. Oh my gosh, am I gonna blank on the name of it? It's a festival of artists that do all this like aerial and visual artwork, and it's all designed around light sculpture. Oh, I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of it. Hasanika, you know, and Alexandra, you know.
Long Exposure Festival.
Long Exposure, thank you. The Long Exposure Festival, this really beautiful festival. They've had a lot of success doing kind of nighttime stuff. I think sometimes there are different concerns from different stakeholders for different reasons. Like I think sometimes the city is nervous to allow events to happen in parks at night because they think maybe it's dangerous. But it's dangerous when no one's in parks. That would be my way of thinking about that. So stuff that's happening at night for sure. I think some parks are there's no lighting at all, so you would really have to build that into your design, and you'd have to really be thinking about electricity. You may need to drop it down from the grid. You may need to get in touch with that park supervisor, and if there is electricity available on site, like through an outbuilding or whatever, just to get in touch and make sure you have electrical access. If you can't have access, you need a generator. There's a lot of considerations about bringing a generator on site in terms of like noise and exhaust, and also fencing it off to the public. So there's all kinds of different considerations. But if you want to talk about that a little bit more, we could definitely talk about that. We haven't had a ton of nighttime stuff, but it's something that's there. But interesting, certainly once we start working into fall and winter projects, it gets dark so early that everything's going to be nighttime stuff at a certain point. If things are happening in the evening. So that's something folks will have to take into consideration. So I'm just gonna take this next question. What has changed between last year's and this year's? Oh, so much has changed. H3, thank you for that question. We used to have sort of two different categories of projects. Like, so one category was like shorter term events, smaller scale events, and you could apply only to up to 15,000 for those types of events, and then long-term, bigger, larger scale events for up to 25,000. And we've just kind of removed those categories and just opening it up a lot more, just so people can just apply for what they need to do their project. The other piece is, yeah, the project timeline. The grant used to happen, be only for projects happening between June and September, and now we're saying it can happen any time of year, and you have more time to complete the project. So it's much more in line with other types of TAC grants that you might get. If you get, say, a theater grant, you would have up to 2 years to complete the project. So it's more similar to our other grants now. We rewrote the guidelines quite a lot just to make them a little bit more, hopefully a little bit more accessible, a little bit more friendly, less bureaucratic sounding. So when you read the grant guidelines, you may notice that it feels a little bit different. Those are the main things I'd say. If we work with various schools in the neighborhoods, is performing on school grounds an option? No. If you're doing activities with, you know, in other spaces, like if you're going into schools or libraries or whatever, that's something you would have to fund. You know, that would not be an included in the funding for this project. This is really for things that are happening in parks. You can certainly collaborate with schools to invite folks to come to the park. Maybe you want to do, and this is nice that actually this project length is going to be bigger now, because it may give you enough runway to actually develop those collaborations with schools. Maybe there's local TDSB or whatever that you want to develop that relationship with some teachers and the principal or whatever, and you want to schedule something that's happening during the school year and bring, you know, classes over to participate in it. That would be amazing. And I just know, like, I have 2 9-year-olds in school right now, and if they got to go to over an avenue and do an activity or project or see a play or whatever, that would be incredible. So that is like a whole field that could really open up inside this program. That's a really great suggestion. Okay. Clay and paper. Tamara and David, did you guys have a question?
Hi there, you can speak now, Clay and Paper Theater.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Erica. I wanted to ask about going back to COVID and working in the park. We're clearly going to have to incorporate and honor the City of Toronto guidelines and provincial guidelines around how we do something in public space in the park. And one of the things that you have probably know about and we've seen, you know, there have to be barriers. Sometimes people have had to sign in so that there could be contact tracing. There's just been a lot of other elements now that have been put on the shoulders of a company. And is that something that will have to, for example, front of house didn't used to be such a complicated thing, right? And is that something that is still something that we're going to have to, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. I guess what I'm trying to say is that, is it something that we're going to have to pay for? Because it's a different thing now. It's not simply front of house anymore. It's health and safety. And I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm just trying to figure out how we handle it. If you don't have the resources, how do you make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, you just have to scale the project to work within the budget that you have. I mean, of course, there's support from volunteers and the Arts in the Parks team, and you know, that might have been less possible in the last spring and summer just because we were in such early days of this, and you know, folks didn't know what was safe, and a lot of us felt that most of it was not safe. And we've sort of been through some events now, and we also kind of know where we are a little bit more now. So things may expand and retract in terms of the public health recommendations. So we will all have to adapt for sure, and you'll have a lot of support. But in terms of like, yeah, you know, sort of figuring out those logistics of where people move in the space, whether or not you want to kind of create not a barrier, because we don't want, you know, to keep people out of the spaces, but like some sort of indicator in a creative way that delineates the space or the performance space or whatever, so that you can be able to keep count, and that you can also do that contact tracing. Yeah, I mean, certainly we will be talking about this a lot, right? Like we'll all have to figure this out together. And I'm sure, I don't know, maybe if like Alexandra, is that something that you feel like you could talk about in terms of like how you would work with those kinds of considerations from a foundation perspective?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit based on what we saw from some of the artists that were able to actually go into the park and do work this summer. So there are City of Toronto guidelines with each event in terms of how to manage health and safety. And I assume that will probably be similar for next year. But, even things like they talk about space delineation, that can be done with pylons on the ground. You don't have to go out and buy fencing, or it can be done with ropes. You really just need to be able to indicate kind of a differentiation of the event space versus the rest of the park. I was speaking to an artist who was able to do contact tracing by having, rather than have people pre-register, they were able to come and text their name to a number, and that's how they tracked all the people that were coming into the event space. There's lots of different strategies that I think that we could discuss with artists when they are confirmed that they have the grant, that we could look at ways to kind of support concerns around health and safety.
Yeah, but I think like if the question is, Tamara, like will TAF sort of like cover those costs, you know what I mean? Like those labor costs, like I think the answer would be no, like similar to sort of the way that we do, and this is another piece that we could talk a little bit about, is like the way that we do, marketing and outreach support, right? Like you as the event producer you do your own marketing and outreach plan, like that's something that's in your purview, as would be these kind of front of house considerations, and then the TAF would like meet you with support on the other side of that. So there's the two things together probably represent like the spectrum of all of the types of things that need to get done. But yeah, like I don't think TAF would like necessarily provide front of house staff to do that type of contact tracing. Would you say that that's a fair thing to say, Alexandra?
I would. So if it might be something to try, if possible, to include in a budget or a plan when you're submitting your grant application. There might be specific instances where we might have staff or volunteer resources to help with that kind of role. But we really have to decide it on a case-by-case basis. It really depends on the scheduling. If we have 4 or 5 events in one weekend, we're not going to be able to go to everything. So it's really hard to say, like I wouldn't depend on that per se.
Thank you. I just, it was really, it does become a line item in the budget now. It has to really be.
Absolutely.
It's not something you just kind of tack on at the end. And because now there's been a thirst for things in public space, and so while we still have to adhere to the limits, I will not be surprised if we still attract people. So that's a job for someone to do, and that's the part that I don't want to say I'm worried about, but it's like I'm trying to figure out how do we manage that, because that is not just us now acting as hosts and welcoming people. There's someone who actually actively has to kind of manage the space in a much more concrete way. That's my only point.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's such a weird time, because I think up until this year, we were just falling over ourselves to try and get people out to these parks for these events, right? And now we're kind of doing the opposite right now. We're like, yeah, I only really want 20 people there. I don't actually want 600 people there. So
That's
now
totally
it's
it,
about, but also, you want to be so careful to be welcoming and invitational and inclusive, and we don't want to be like putting up barricades and, policing people out and keeping them out and telling them they can't come in, because the parks are public spaces that we all share, but we have to keep each other safe. So yeah, this is going to be a real dance that we're all going to have to navigate so carefully and with such attention and nuance that it is going to be the material of all of these proposals, I feel. So we'll really take care to be in really close conversation with all of you and create a lot of space to share ideas and just share resources with each other, because we're really going to need to get through this together with a ton of support. Thank you for that question. Okay, I'm sort of aware that we're at the end of our time, so I think I'm just going to leave it there. If anyone has any questions, if you want to follow up for conversation, we can totally do that. Just you know, email me if you have any questions for Toronto Arts Foundation folks. You can get in touch. Let me know. I can put you in touch with Alexandra and Jacqueline and Hasanika. If you have questions for park people, you know, put them in touch with park people. There's my email in the chat. It's also all over our TAC website. Thank you so much for coming. I'm sure that there are going to be lots of other questions, really specific, nuanced questions, and let's keep in conversation about all of these things. I wish you all well. Good luck with your applications. Thank you so much to our interpreters this evening. It's always great to see you. And take care, everyone. We'll talk again soon. Thank you.